You do not have to become a content creator. What you have to become is a master of who you are and know how to package and present that in order for you to be able to provide food, clothing, everything for yourself and your family, to be able to provide for yourself. That is what we're talking about. We're not asking for anyone to become the next entrepreneurial guru. All we're saying is redefine what work looks like for you, because the world is redefining it, and you have to pay attention and fall into alignment so that you don't get into desperate situations.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of I Have Something to Say. And today's a very timely topic, and I had to invite my friend, Monique Mills. She's the founder and chief innovation strategist for TPM Focus, and it's a consulting firm that really focuses on developing and edifying and guiding entrepreneurs from the moment the idea pops into their head about a business solution, right? Or how to solve a problem, to fruition and then scaling internationally. And welcome, Monique, for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. Thank you for the intro.
Absolutely. And so just to give a little bit of background, because we're the topic for the day is the white collar gig economy. And when I saw you post about this, I'm like, okay, we need to have this conversation because it's so imminent right now. But I want to give a little bit of background of your trajectory, right? To really provide some context as to why. And this is something that I admire about you I want to say it's been 3 years since the pandemic. We're LinkedIn girlfriends. And so never met in person, but we're familia, right? And so every time you post something, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like mind blowing, and you're always 5 steps ahead. And so, give us a little bit of context as to why entrepreneurship for you. You're a serial entrepreneur as well, and and just tell us your big why and how, right, you landed where you are.
Yeah. So the big why is it's different than how it started out. So I didn't embark upon entrepreneurship in the normal way. It just kind of happened when I was doing my MBA, and I learned how people really make money. Like in the first week or two, I was like, wow. So as an engineer, a degreed engineer, they never teach us how to make money. They teach us how to create. And when I learned like how not to just create value for myself, but for other people, I, I just had to do it. So that's when I started out, and I set out into tech entrepreneurship, and I had a software company that I created from scratch. And that really began my entrepreneurial journey and understanding what it takes to not even just sell things for a business, but to sell yourself. Because as a startup, you're really selling an idea. And I was able to get investors to back me and things of that nature, but not without practice. Because as an engineer, we're typically introvert. And so I'm an introvert. And so the things that I do, even being on this podcast, is not in my nature. So it's one of those things where I had to prepare myself. And I just believe that that's what everyone is going to have to do, is know how to sell themselves, and what they know how to do and provide value to other people in order to survive in this world. It's not going to be an option.
And the thing is, so then as an engineer and in your academic journey,
Mhm.
you were obviously exposed to the whole corporate sector and that mindset. I mean, so you participated in all of that, and so
I
you know both sides of the coin.
I do. And so here's my thing with corporate. So I'm a person who is very driven, and I honestly get intellectually bored. So, you know how they say nowadays, oh, young people, they don't keep a job more than 2 years. I was doing that before it was popular. I say I'm an old millennial because I would get in my job, I would master it, and then I'm like, I'm ready for more. I'm ready for more. And within most organizations, it's only but so much you can do because there's a hierarchy. And there are people who are in places that should or shouldn't be there, but you don't have any control over that.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing is with me, I get bored with the topic, with the subject. So I've done everything from semiconductors to aviation to power generation, building power plants, building buildings and construction. Like I developed very deep expertise in so many different things. And I'm like, okay, what's next? What's next? It's like
Right,
being,
right.
yeah. And so that doesn't fit well in corporate America.
Mm-mm.
Uh, and as someone who likes to remain intellectually stimulated and do it well. See, some people just want
Mm-hmm.
to change jobs to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
That's not it. For me, I want to provide value, and that's how I am even in business. And so, yeah, so haven't played the whole corporate game. I've even was involved in politics, but not as a elector, but I worked for someone who was a publicly elected official. And
Mm-hmm.
I would tell you that was probably one of the biggest learning experiences of my life because the curtains were pulled back for me because I was so close to the top. Like I was third from the top. So he's elected official. Is one person between he and I. And a lot of times we would go into meetings and things together. So I would understand what's happening politically and why and how the whole game is played. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I quite honestly can't see myself playing that political game.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, in that particular job, that elected official was phenomenal. He did things from the heart. And I know you don't typically find quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote good people in politics, but he was. And so I learned so much about how I needed to present myself to get buy-in. So, it would be things like I would say that we needed something. I was in construction for them. So I ran a team of architects and engineers. And we would build buildings for the state of Georgia
Mm-hmm.
and campuses and things for like those with disabilities and special needs, schools. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so at this one time, I went to this school just to do a visit. The elected official said, "Hey, I'm getting some complaints about this facility that we own here. So can you go take a look at it?" I went there; it was an absolute disaster. I came back and I told him, I said, "We would never let a dog live in these
Oh
places
my
that
goodness.
people are sending their children to." And he had me prepare like a whole, prepare your thoughts and how we should proceed in order to move forward with this. And I told him it needs to be torn down and we
Wow.
build something from scratch. And for that project, I got $50 million.
Wow.
So, and it's a new campus. I mean, and we've done that a few times, but I learned the power of communicating in order to influence and to put the things that I know technically into layman's terms in order
Mm-hmm.
to influence things to help people. And that's really what I would say I do in my day to day business, and how I help people create, I would say, create value with their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not providing value, then don't do it. Who wants it? Who's going to pay for it? Right. And so all those kind of answers is what I help them find.
That's great. And can I tell you, and it's that, right? That's where the experience comes in, and being able to comment like you did about the white collar gig economy
Mhm.
comes into play. I feel you because I was the same. When in my the first, 6 years of my career, I switched jobs 4 times, and my father was like having a heart attack because he
Darn.
was a he worked in the government for 30 years, retired. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?" Right? But the same for the same reason, it's like I need more, or I got into trouble because I would call people out on their nonsense, right? And it's like I'm out the door. But I landed in sales and marketing, which is very entrepreneurial. Even if
Right.
you work for somebody, you have to have that bug, because otherwise you're not going to survive. And
Yep.
so as I transitioned out because of the 2008 recession and losing my job, it was like an easy transition into entrepreneurship in a way. But no one tells you, right?
Yeah.
Those key things, that you need to know to start off right. And so, I was a very lonely place. But that's why we have, right? Consulting firms like yours that
Yeah.
can really provide that kind of guidance, and also not only just for the inbound entrepreneur or an entrepreneur or a startup that wants to scale, but also for those people that are right now what I call like purgatory or the limbo, right? The corporate limbo, right?
Yeah.
Because they've lost their jobs to automation, or they've been asked to do early retirement, but they still have a lot in them to give, and they're maybe looking for a second career or something else to do, but they're kind of stuck. So, what compelled you to write this piece or this, post? I know that you read the article that came out on CNN,
Mhm.
really focusing on the white collar gig economy, right, or the gig worker, right? And
Right.
so, talk to me about this concept.
So you and I are both very active on LinkedIn. So we see a lot. We see things and we talk about things a lot of times before the masses are talking about it. But this
Mhm.
is something I've been talking about in my circles for a while. And I also say, you just mentioned white collar gig economy. The term gig is going to change once white collar people start entering it in masses, because the term gig is associated with being low pay, a servant worker, and all these
Mhm.
nonsense terms. Um,
Yeah.
and some people feel like I'm better than that. I'm not a freelancer. I'm a consultant, and okay, that's fine. But ultimately, you see so many people laid off, and like, please stop. Don't scroll anymore. Stop right here. I need a job.
Mhm.
I've been unemployed. I'm getting ready to lose my house. My wife is leaving me. The kids are starving. Like, we see so many posts like that on LinkedIn, and for
Mhm.
months and months and months from the same people who are
Mhm.
highly qualified, who have done a lot of things in their career and provide a lot of
Mhm.
value and made a lot of companies a lot of money in
Yes.
their careers, right? And the companies
Mhm.
don't care. I mean, they had to or decided to, that's debatable if they had to, but that's neither here nor there. They made the decision to make that cut. And so people are expecting to be able to find a job the same way we did in the 90s and early 2000s, where I mean, I could literally find a job just by going on Monster. I would have like 10 people calling me within a few days.
Right.
Nowadays, like, it that you your resume, like, it's all done through a applicant tracking system. It's dependent on keywords, things of that nature. And these people know this, and they're
Mhm.
still questioning themselves, like, why isn't anyone picking me? I have all of this experience and I've done all these things in my career. And what they don't realize is that the workforce, the hiring has changed. What companies are willing to pay for has changed. They
Mhm.
actually, I would say this, now there's more emphasis on what value do you provide to the company, and as far as like financially, not what you know how to do. So a lot of the ways that people are presenting themselves, because just because you know how to use Excel doesn't mean I need that in the business. Right?
Right.
So some people are like, "Well, I know, it could be graphic design. I know graphic design." Well, we don't need that. We need someone that can run the data for the marketing attribution system that we have, and can tell us and give us informed analysis so that we can make decisions moving forward. Like that's different. And no matter
Yeah.
how people try to word that on their resume, it's not going to come through as to somebody's desk and they're reading this like saying, "Hey, you know what, Monique really, I think she could be a good person for this data analyst role in our marketing department." Like it's just not working that way. I believe that the world is going more so toward being hired up front for particular projects.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be more project based. That project may be 2 years, it may be 2 months, but you have an agreed contract up front. Like, okay, this is a project we've decided to do or that we're vetting right now, and they could be running the numbers to figure out what the IRR or ROI of it is going to be, and they decide who they're going to or what resources they need to pull it off, and they may not have it internally. They could have laid off those people, right? They may not have
Mm-hmm.
internally. But if you're someone that has that skill set, then it's actually beneficial for companies to hire you as a consultant, freelancer, whatever you want to call it, gig worker, let's call it that,
Uh-huh.
um, than it is to do a full time employee and then figure out what to do with them once this project is over.
Right. Right.
So, so being able to go inside of a company and say, what are you working on right now? Like, what problems need to be solved in there? And then being able to propose how I can fix that for you. That problem. I'm not saying hire me full time. I'm saying
Right.
I'm going to solve this problem for you. It may take 6 months, it may take a year. I'm not sure. But let's start out with a 6 month contract. Right. And then as I'm in there and I'm working it and they're seeing results, because listen, when you're not an employee, and people need to understand this, when you're not an employee of a company, when they hire vendors and stuff, you have metrics and KPIs. You have to prove that their money is well spent.
Mm-hmm.
Employees aren't used to that, right? As long as I show up, I get my check, right? As long as
Yeah.
I answer my emails, I get my check. But when you are being graded upon deliverables, that you committed to in a contract because you are a business per se. That's a completely different way of being accountable and providing value to a company that they can directly tie to a financial number, which is what they all want to do. It's not about filling up cubicles anymore. Um, and so the other point on that financially is that when they hire folks as consultants, so we talk about the value of a business. Now I'm not going to get too deep into pulling out, MBA terms and all that stuff. That's not the most important part. The most important part here I want you all to understand is why it's beneficial for a company to hire an outside vendor, consultant, whatever you want to call it, than it is to have a full-time employee. Ultimately, companies are valued. Like they have a valuation associated with them, which is based upon EBITDA, right? The earnings
Mm-hmm.
before interest, right? Interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, right? When you hire consultants, there is no hit against that EBITDA number. It's
Oh.
right. So if my EBITDA is $2 million a year and I want to sell my company or I want, I want to, let's say, have a value placed on my company to increase the amount of debt I'm able to take out, right? They're going to look at the EBITDA. And if I have full-time employees that cost me 500,000, I'm just saying 500,000 a year.
Yeah.
My EBITDA, I now have these employees, it goes down to 1.5 million, right? If I hire a consultant, my EBITDA stays at 2 million because that's considered a one-time expense.
Wow.
So I think that people really need to understand why, especially for smaller businesses as well. But not even, and I don't even say, I say small, medium, but some of these Fortune 500 companies, they even bring in consultants because they understand this concept. And
Yeah.
it depends on what department is hiring for the particular consultant or vendor to come in. But a lot of times that's why they do it because they don't have to go through the whole employment law, firing people, unemployment
Yeah, the
benefits,
onboarding process,
all of
all of
that.
that all those processes and all that overhead is not needed.
It's not needed. But that's why the onus comes on you as an individual to then
Mhm.
understand all the things that go into operating a business. Let's say you do set up
Mhm.
an LLC or S corp or, you know, C corp, whatever you decide to set
Mhm.
up, whatever kind of entity. I would suggest doing that versus going out and just trying to be a 1099 independent contractor.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's a negative for me.
Mhm.
I would never suggest someone to do that. Set up the LLC, spend the $200, get the articles of incorporation, all of those things. Get an EIN number, so they're paying that versus your social security number. And you also get a level of coverage, right, of
Right.
liability separate from your personal, your personal liability. So
Right. And assets and all of that gets
right,
protected. Yes,
right.
totally. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
people aren't thinking that way. They're thinking, I need a job because I need that 401k. There's something called a solo 401k. There's something called a self-funded 401k.
Mhm.
And in reality, when you do these projects with companies, you actually, or you do contracts with companies, you actually get paid more as a business, as a vendor, than you would as an employee. So let's say you were making 200,000 a year, right?
Mhm.
You can, and that's for the full year, 12 months. What if you can
Yeah.
make 200,000 in 6 months?
Right.
Which you could.
Yes, you can. Totally, but it's a shift in mindset
Right.
though. And what I'm hearing is that that shift has to happen internally
It
because
does.
the dynamics in the workplace have shifted also. Everything has to be justified. Every employee, it's like you bring it and you know what? I've heard from friends
Uh-huh.
with so much experience, multidisciplinary expertise that the interviewing processes that they're going through are brutal.
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
we're talking about 8 people interviewing at the same time,
Mhm.
multiple interviews, in person panels. I mean, it's crazy. It's so crazy, but I think it's because of that. Because all of these department heads or the company as a whole needs to ensure that the investment
Yep.
in this human resource, in this person and their abilities,
Mhm.
first fits, two sounds like it's the real deal, right? Because there, a lot of people can really, yeah, talk a
They're
good
good on
game.
paper. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, they could talk a good game, but then not deliver the goods. And three, to really get a feel for the person's mindset. That's what I'm thinking, right? If this person, that's what I've been observing from the questions that are being asked when I talk to friends, right? They tell them, I'm like, so what did they ask?
Mhm.
Or when they put me down as a reference and then they call to talk about this person, by the
Yeah.
line of questioning, that's what I'm picking up. I'm
Yeah.
picking up that it's all about value, independent thinking, but also
Mhm.
collaborative, someone that can collaborate, right, about returns, about results. What are the results? What are the outcomes? What is right? And that kind of, yeah, assessment.
Yeah, and I think that that's the main thing, is that people don't realize that companies, I mean, especially in this day and age, I feel like we're becoming more and more capitalistic by the day. Like it's like we can't help ourselves, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so companies are really looking at those numbers because they have to justify, especially if they hire someone in and that person doesn't actually, it doesn't boost their bottom line at all. It doesn't help them with savings at all. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
their jobs are at risk. Like I don't, as a business owner myself, I
Yeah.
don't, I can understand why some companies go through so much. It's not fair. It's not, there's definitely better ways to do it, but they do that out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid even for their own selves. That old saying that I've heard older people who used to be around when IBM was, the big shot in the room. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, one saying is people, are never scared to buy from IBM. Like they wouldn't buy a off brand. You never get fired from, buying from IBM. And that's
Right.
because it's a brand that's trusted. They deliver on their product. It's something that's well known. Where, I mean, for individual, unless you have a brand online and you have things where people are willing to vouch that you've done that work for them and this is an indication of it, then I mean you're basically unknown and you're asking someone to risk their job
Mm-hmm.
to win. Because ultimately it'll come down to those, those few people's decision. And they get analysis paralysis. We have to understand that we're dealing with human beings here, right? And so they get scared, they're fearful as well for their jobs and making the right decision. So that's why you really the system for interviewing and hiring is just broken. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so presenting yourself with what problems do you have to solve, and I think I can solve that problem for you, and this is how. Back to what you were saying about the interview process and how brutal it is. One thing I was
Yeah.
today was folks were saying how, I did all of this work. You know how they'll have them do a special project or something just for the interview, and it's unpaid.
Yeah. I
And
know.
it may take them hours to do it, things of that nature. Now, as a business owner and someone who work with people whose entire business model is answering RF, RFPs and
Mm.
RFQs, they're used to putting in hours of work and there's no guarantees. You see how there's a different mindset shift, right?
Yes.
They're used
Yes.
to, I think that employees are people who our employees now are going to have that similar kind of shift, but not to get a full-time job, but to get a contract.
Mm.
Um, because if they were getting a contract where they were making 200 in 6 months versus in a year,
Yeah.
I think that would be like, okay, yeah, this is worth putting this time in because I can make 200,000 in 6 months where I was making 200,000 in a year. And not only can I make 200,000 in 6 months, looking at your capacity, you can probably perform multiple projects at once, maybe with the same company, maybe with another company, but you don't have those strings, those handcuffs on you to say you
Yes.
only do work for this one particular company. So
Right.
your your earning capacity increases. So when
Y-
you think about having to prove what you know how to do, that's negligible. We do that
mm,
as business owners.
Right. Right. And then if you collaborate with others
Exactly.
to build bandwidth, then I mean, you're creating even more opportunities. It's like you're throwing your net even wider, right? Because
Exactly.
it's all compounded and creates that critical mass that you might need to then grow even faster. And I'm going to tell you, this is what I've seen. I just feel that a lot of people, and I mean a lot, that I've spoken to, um, that come from very successful careers
Hmm.
in across various industries, right? Um, Again, back to the 90s, back
Yeah.
to the early 2000s, that they had reached a certain level, even into the executive suite,
Mhm.
with corporate cards and going to fancy events and
Yep.
the galas and travel, right?
Right.
You
Right.
just collect your receipts, you hand them in. Those days are over.
It's
I mean,
done.
it exists, but not in mass. Like we were
Right.
talking, right before we got onto, this conversation and the
Right.
recording. It's
Hmm.
like we need to have that mindset shift, because even if you're out there looking for a job in corporate,
Hmm.
it's not the same as it used to be, right? And it's never going back to that.
No.
And you need to come to the realization that you have to shift the way you think about showing up at work,
Yep.
because they're looking at you very closely, and it's all about the KPIs, right? It's like, how are you
Right.
performing? What are you doing? I mean, talk about, is that not really micromanagement? It's
Mhm.
really reporting on results, right? And really demonstrating, it's those days of, oh, I made so many trips, this many calls, whatever, and I tried my best, right? And so yeah,
Right.
we landed some
That's not
we
gonna hit
landed
it.
some business, but yeah, it's not happening
Right.
anymore.
When you mention about the corporate cards and the travel and things of that nature, if people understood that as a business owner, if you you still want to do those things, you can. I mean, most of it is tax write-offs if it's business related. But in order to be able to still do those things, you have to be earning money, right? You have to be able to pay for those things. And then you get the tax benefit of it being a deduction at the end of the year. And I think a lot of people don't think about just the benefits of being an entrepreneur. It's a lot of unspoken things, and I think that there's information out there that people can get, but just kind of breaking it down into very simplified under things that can be understood by anybody in any industry, any education level, on how to do it, some of the benefits of it, and some ways to prepare for it. So we were talking about setting up your entity. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
Setting that up. We also spoke about how, yeah, your company may be doing 401ks, right? And so you're like, well, I need my 401k. You can do that. When you get
Mm-hmm.
paid 200,000 for that 6 months, you can take a lump sum and put it in 401k. You can have 401k coming out of your account automatically, just like your company does it, but you're doing it for yourself. And you can also borrow from yourself when you do your own self-funded 401ks. So like some people do that now when they work for a company, like Fidelity, for example, is a big holder of people's 401ks. Well, a lot of people go to Fidelity and say, hey, I want to take 40,000 out of my 401k and pay myself back each month. So they think they'll miss out on that if they become an entrepreneur, and that's just not true. You can do the same thing as an entrepreneur. Um,
Yeah.
it's it's a matter of planning, right? And knowing that these benefits, you'll be responsible for paying for them, but you'll also be making more money. And you'll be employed instead of waiting for someone to pick you, saying, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me. I'll be a good worker. Like that doesn't work anymore. Get out of the pick me line. Go and solve someone's problem. Say, I can solve. What problem do you have? I can solve that. This is how I can solve it. Give me 3 months to solve it. This will be my price. Like, start
And
approaching that and see what happens.
yeah, and that is so. I mean, I agree with you. The semantics of it, right? Right now, we're using again, right, the white collar gig economy, and that's going to change because there's a yucky, right, feeling attached to the word gig, which is true, right, in the sense where, but that's what it is. It's a gig.
It's
I
a
used to
gift.
say that. I used to say that, hey, congrats on your new gig, and people look at me. It's like, oh,
Right.
I, I'm the VP of. I'm like, oh, sorry, it's a gig, because it'll last just as long as you're useful, you're
Right.
useful to them, right? And so it's so funny, but it's great that you mention about shifting the mindset from 1099 consultant to get by while you get the job, and just
Right.
stepping into that, right,
Mhm.
into that space and confidence that there's nothing wrong with you. You
Mhm.
have a lot to contribute, right, and that maybe, just maybe, there's some areas that you just need to either polish up or amp your game in, right? And I know that some of the things that you mentioned in your post were, obviously the entrepreneurial skills, but project management
Project
skills,
management. Yes.
sales skills,
Yep.
communication skills. Talk to me a little bit about how that, supports this full person,
Yeah.
problem solver presentation, right?
Yeah.
Either working for somebody, or going into the blue collar, professional gig economy.
See, unfortunately, companies, it really depends, but they don't really appreciate employees being too vocal online. Um,
Mm,
it's just sharing their expertise. I've had a few folks around me actually recently get fired for
wow.
sharing
Too much.
their expertise. No, really, it was really just their expertise. They
Wow.
weren't promoting themselves. They weren't trying to sell anything. They were just sharing their expertise. But the companies decided that's not a good fit for us, and they let them go. And
Wow.
so they'll each of the individuals say, well, they just didn't want me sharing online. I think they were just like, they didn't like all the attention I was getting, this and that. That could be because, once again, humans are human, right? They have emotional
Mm-hmm.
feelings and jealousy and envy and all those things. But ultimately, how is that applying to their bottom line? Right.
Mm.
So when you sign an employment agreement, the employment agreement basically tells you what your daily tasks are going to be. It doesn't assign you metrics.
Mm.
It doesn't assign you metrics. So that's up to you as the employee to say, how does this add value to the business and or to our customers, which is sometimes two in the same, right? Because sometimes what you're doing adds value to the business, but not necessarily to the customer, and vice versa. And sometimes what you're doing adds value to both. But through everything that you do as an employee, you're walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And the other main thing about this point is that nothing is guaranteed. So you're just talking about people who are saying, I got this gig, and they you're saying, congratulations on your gig, and they're like, oh, I'm the VP of so and so. Listen, when I was in corporate, I would tell them, yes, I'm the head engineer on the project for building $1 billion power plant, but you can call me the janitor. It doesn't matter what my title is.
Right. Uh-huh.
I'm getting paid my money. I know what I'm doing. You respect and know what I'm doing. I don't care what the title is. Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are defined by that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but as soon as you're able to get over that, the further you'll be able to go. Right.
I
So,
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I also was confronted with that kind of comment
mhm,
with people in my circles that were, and I'm talking about 10 years ago, right? When publishing, because I come from the publishing industry, right?
okay.
That kind of almost died, right? With the internet. When the internet finally caught on, right? Then it
Yes.
was like, okay, forget about magazines, newspapers, and all of that. It's all going online. And so
Mhm.
what happened is that a lot of people in my circles had to do either a career shift
Yes.
or like a sidestep,
Mhm.
I thankfully, got laid off during the 2008 recession. Had no other choice, right? But to
Yeah.
just put the machete between my teeth and go hunting and start this business. But many people got stuck in that and had a huge lull, right? A huge lull, because it's again holding on to
Mhm.
this. I don't know. I don't know if it's nostalgia. I don't know what it is,
An
right?
idea. It's an idea. So, and
Yeah,
I hate to use this word, but it's an idea of how they think work is supposed to treat them and what they deserve. I hate to use this word, but there's a level
yeah.
of entitlement.
Mm.
There's a level of entitlement because of that you've worked so hard and you've done so many things in order to be here. Why can't you just have, you know, a job that pays you what you require, that utilizes your skills? That's great. That's ideal in a perfect world. But we know that it's just people. This whole system is broken. I
Yeah.
use this example. I told my I was just making fun of myself like I always do to my husband, and I was just like, I work out every day. I still don't look like Beyonce. Like, I'm never gonna look like Beyonce or Jennifer Lopez. Like, so you know what I mean? Just because I work hard doesn't mean I'm entitled to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Like,
so
there
funny.
are other factors involved in what gets them that outcome. And if I
Right.
don't know all of those things, it could be relationships. If I go back to the whole diet and food thing, they have chefs. They have people
Yeah.
that come in and give them a massage after every workout. Jennifer Lopez does a massage every single day, she said, at her house. You
Yeah.
know, like,
Imagine. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they have people drive them around everywhere. I'm driving kids around. It's like we don't
Yeah.
have the same things. So I think
Exactly.
it's important for people to, like, and even with the mindset of, I went to college, so I deserve this kind of job that pays me this much. Who said that? Like, that maybe used to be the case, but that's not the
Right.
case anymore. So everyone has to adjust and shift, let go of that entitlement mindset. Yes, everyone should be able to have a a livable wage, a working wage, be able to use their gifts and skills and talents. But it's very confusing out here. We're not in an organized world that way. So you have to find and make your way, in order to make those things come to fruition because it's not set up for you to win. It's just not.
Yeah, one of the things, it's so spot on, and I learned a long time ago that you, even with the titles, right? It's
Yeah.
like you have control over defining for yourself what success is supposed to look like, right? And
Yes.
so, and I remember that I was the publisher of a national Spanish language magazine before I shifted to a job in publishing, also based out of New York, but that afforded me to work remotely from home. This was 19 years ago, right? And so I was able to negotiate that. Imagine that, right? And
Yeah.
so I went from being publisher, which is like I mean, aside from owner of the magazine, publisher's like right below, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I had grown in the ranks to that level. But then when I did this shift to another job that paid more or less the same, a little bit more than what I was making as a publisher, but the title was national advertising director, right? So it wasn't even VP. It was like two or three steps down, but it paid the same amount of money. And it let me work from, I wanted to move to Orlando, right? I didn't want to live in New
Okay.
York
Right.
anymore. But I was making a New York, you know what I'm saying? So who cares
Right.
about the title?
Right.
This was 19 years ago, right? And
Right.
so I totally agree with you. It's about not letting words,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
labels define who you are and your sense of worth.
Mhm.
And then just being able to see things for what they are and understand your place in that, right? And how you can contribute to then people, for people to recognize your value and say, wow, we need to bring him in on board, her on board, them
Yeah.
on board,
Yeah.
because yes, they're gonna bring in all of this expertise, for this
Yeah.
project to be successful. And then the thing is that leads to other things. I know it because that's how I
Right.
built my, that's how what entrepreneurship is all about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It says nothing is guaranteed, anyways, when it comes to positions at companies. Then it allows you the flexibility as well. So you don't really feel like it's a marriage and you've been cheated on and they've decided they want a divorce and they didn't tell you anything about that, right? That's how people are feeling like, oh my God, I thought we were good. And it's like, you wouldn't take it as personally if it was an open marriage. I don't know. We committed for this time frame, but I'm
Yeah.
allowed to get to because I am a business, right? You have hired my business, not me as an individual. These are the deliverables that we're going to deliver to your business, based upon your criteria. And I'm allowed to do these same things for other companies because
Right.
this is what people who are employees fail to realize because of the way the workplace has been structured with this 40 hours a week thing is
Yeah.
how long it takes you to do something does not determine how much you get paid for it. That's what you learn as an entrepreneur. So you could be making 200,000 in 6 months for something that literally takes you 2 weeks to do.
Right. Right. But with a job, you're kind of stuck there. Although
Weird.
I feel like, yeah, I know. But so a lot of people, like, though have like the side gig and they keep it, under the radar, until they're ready to venture out. But I just feel that there's so much freedom in just understanding, that there's so many more opportunities, and that you can either do both or
Yeah.
just take that step into freeing yourself of, limitations and parameters, and also trying to set right healthy boundaries of engagement. And when you mentioned before about the 6 month contract, it's funny because we normally approach new opportunities with exactly that approach. We call it the dating period. When you
Yes.
mentioned about open marriages, and so then I said, we like to break bread with prospective clients, And we sell them. He said, "Oh, it's so good. We just wanted to feel your vibe, learn a little bit more about, the gaps or, your pain points to see how we can provide solutions." And we have like mini brainstorming sessions, very informally, over
Mhm.
a nice lunch or dinner. And then we say, "This feels good," right? Because also energy is very important to us, right? It's
Yeah.
not for other people, and that's okay, right? But for
Mhm,
us, it
mhm.
is, because I want to have fun on the
Right.
projects that I'm working on, right? And so
Uh-huh.
we tell them, "How about this? We're going to send a proposal for 6 months, see how this goes. And if we're both ready, right? Because you're evaluating us, but we're evaluating you too,
Mhm.
right? To see if we want to jump into bed with each other." And
Mhm.
it provokes a laugh, right? 9 out of 10 times people, crack up and find it hilarious. But it's that, right? Is be able to step into this space where you could just be open and
Yeah.
honest and
Yeah.
transparent and just be a person talking to another person. And how can we help each other, right?
Mhm.
It's like, you have a problem that I think I can help you resolve. And then what we've experienced, as a business, and I started as a solopreneur, right? Now we have a team, and is that once you're in, and if the vibe is good and they
Mhm.
want to keep on dating you, then there's intentionality
Yeah.
behind finding more projects, so there's continuity in the
Yeah.
relationship, right? And
Mhm.
so I don't know. I just think that there's a lot to be said about people that have a lot of experience in white collar jobs across all industries, have so much to give.
Yes.
And sometimes they get stuck because they need that shift in mindset that would just afford them the opportunity to see everything that's in front of them, because there's money out there to be made, right? It's just developing these skills in project management. I love that. Project management is key.
Yeah.
The sales skills, right? They should give sales 101 in college. I don't know why that doesn't exist.
They should. I mean, every single person on earth needs to know how to sell, because even in interviewing, you're selling yourself, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You need to know how to sell a product, and in that case, you are the product. But everyone on earth needs to know how to sell and like understand the dynamics at play. I think once people become adults, if they haven't been informed by their parents that the world is actually very selfish in a lot of in a lot of ways, because people have needs and obligations, so you
Hmm.
can't take things personally. And I'm not saying everyone is transactional and everything is transactional, but you have to take a moment to evaluate the benefits. People are evaluating the benefits of your existence in their lives, in their company. Like
Yeah.
it's and most people are shocked to learn that, oh my God, they just see me as like this asset, this entity. And they take it very personally. And I completely understand that. I mean, of course, that we're humans, but
Yes.
sooner they understand that people are always evaluating into adulthood when they're responsible for bills and feeding themselves and
Yeah.
feeding families and doing that, they're evaluating things much differently than you've ever been evaluated, as a child or anything of that nature, because people don't want anything from you as a child.
Right.
But
Because
as you become an adult, like there are some reciprocity involved here. So
yeah, yes, that's so true. And so, and you're right. And that sense of it, entitlement. Well, at least in my house, that doesn't that doesn't fly for one second. I mean, my poor children, they're like so they understand. And I'm like, "No, papi, we don't own this house." And they're like, "What do you mean we don't own this house?" And no, until we don't pay that mortgage in full, right? We Nobody owns this house. And so then when we told them this, when they were like 9 and 7, they were like, "Wait, what?" And in a way, I mean, some people would say, "Oh my God, that's cruel, because you're gonna instill this sense of vulnerability and uncertainty." No, it's not. It's reality.
yes.
This is it. The bank owns the house, right? And so and so these are things I agree with you. And so then it removes the sense of self entitlement
They have
because
to understand how the world works. Um,
hmm
and if you don't pay the mortgage, okay, that's one aspect. But even if the government, what people don't understand is the government can always take your property. They can always take
okay.
your property. It's called eminent domain. If they find that there's a better use for the land that your house is on, you have to take what they're offering you and leave. And they can do
Oh.
whatever they want with your property. No one really actually owns property. Now, I'm telling you this as a licensed realtor for almost the past 20 years. My kids are required to take a real estate class before they go to college so they understand these things. Because that outside of college, I think the biggest expense most people will have is purchasing a property. So
Yes.
there is something called eminent domain. If you
I'm
don't pay
writing
your
that
taxes,
down.
yeah, if you don't pay your taxes, it's even take if your bank, the person, the people that you owe the mortgage to, if they don't pay the taxes, the government is taking that land. Like they're always the top of the food chain. And so I think that a lot of things that a lot of ways that the world is kind of organized, especially, here in the US. I think if people understood it and understood some of the pros and cons and risks and rewards, they would be able to make more informed decisions that
Mm,
weren't based upon fear, but understanding their consequences, right? But understanding how it works, I think, gives people the freedom to think critically about what's best for them.
hmm Yes, and how they fit into different scenarios so they can make better choices
Yeah.
and also be less I don't know, fearful, complacent.
So
Yeah,
here's the
all of
thing.
those things.
I mean, how do you think about this? I think that people think we as entrepreneurs are not are we're just built differently. We're more courageous. We don't have fear. No, I'm fearful every day. Like I have two kids that want to go to medical school. I have like, oh my gosh, like this is
Yes.
we here's the difference. Despite the fear, we do it anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we have at some point you have to trust yourself and know what you're capable of because you're out here when you're interviewing for jobs. You're asking those people to trust you and know what you're capable of, and they don't even know you. If you don't even
Right.
have that same respect for yourself, then that's an indication that there's some work to be done.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because that just that I fractured my arm a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, and it's been very challenging because I'm always go go go, and it's made me have to pace myself and all of that, and it's very frustrating for me, right? Because again, KPIs, right, the output that I normally give is just not there. And so um it's very I've been very vulnerable, right, these past 3 weeks. I mean, up and down, right, my emotions of like anything could I could just lose it, right, at the drop of a hat. And I got to tell you, last week I just felt so overwhelmed because I'm very much about meeting deadlines and setting reasonable expectations and all of that. But of course, in my head, I'm fully capable and I can't because I'm in the mend. And so, so then I was very frustrated last week. And my poor husband, we worked together, and I was like, that's it. I'm just gonna go get myself a job, that I could work 9 to 5, get my paycheck every 2 weeks later for this, right? And I just lost it. I just lost my
Yeah.
shit. It was like bad, right? And he just looks at me because he knows better than to just try to calm me down, right? And so once I got over it, right? It lasted like what, 30 minutes. Then,
Right.
I was like licking my wounds and I was like, oh no, 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 bad idea. Let's get back on track. Wait, let me just calm down. Let me go for a walk.
I'm so glad you share that because, in all reality, every entrepreneur goes through that multiple times a year. So
Yes.
for people to think that it's this different world for entrepreneurs, they're highly mistaken. And I'm so glad we're talking about it because when people feel like that, they'd be like, "Oh, okay, this is what everybody's going through," right? And so
Yeah.
they're able to pull themselves together once they know we all go through that.
Yeah, 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 definitely. This was really great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, right, your lived experiences, for giving some weigh in, right, on all of these possibilities, because there's no right or wrong here, right? Working for, a company, or in the government sector, or in the nonprofit sector, or on your own, there's value in all of it. We actually need it, to sustain, our society, and really grow, as individuals, and all of that.
Mhm.
But the point here is that there's a shift,
Yes.
and with that shift in how work is being done, and how the workforce is being viewed, people, especially white collar professionals, are, yeah, you're strongly encouraging them, right, to
Hmm.
shift their mindsets as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Today, start looking into it. Start reading it. Start by listening to this episode a second time around.
Yes, absolutely. Any last minute tips, and takeaways to leave people with, like something that they can maybe do today, aside from listening to the episode again, but that would maybe help, right? Feel, a sense of value, feel a sense of purpose, and some kind of, direction.
Yeah. So I got one thing I would tell them to do, and then one thing I tell them not to do. So the first thing to
Okay.
do is take note of all of the gifts and skills that you have. Like literally write it down. What you enjoy doing, especially, and especially, work wise. What have you done in the past? And you're like, oh, that's fulfilling. What kind of problems have you solved in the past? Write that down. Trust me, that problem still exists. I mean, pretty much every problem still exists.
Yeah.
It's just being solved in a different way, right? Um, and then on the thing not to do is do not follow the online gurus that are telling you all you got to do is this. Just buy this
Mm.
course. Just use this software. Just do no, no, no. That will get you all confused and caught up in this whirlwind of things that will have you spending money and not have any results. What we're talking about here is packaging and presenting in a way where you go into your industry to solve problems. Like you're not going to become a content creator online and start creating videos and write a course and like that's not what
Mhm.
we're talking about here. We understand that many people are good at their jobs and what they do, still want to work in their industry for companies that they were competitors or were a company they worked for before. I have people that I did my MBA with who quit their job and then was rehired as their company for their job and worked for years, 8, 9 years, making lots more money than they were ever making as
As
an
a
employee.
consultant.
Yes.
Yes.
So, that's what we're talking about. So do not get caught up in the whirlwind of like, okay, well, I need to become a content creator and like, no, that's not what we're talking about. You do not have to become a content creator. What you have to become is a master of who you are and know how to package and present that in order for you to be able to provide, you know, food, clothing, everything for yourself and your family, to be able to provide for yourself. That is what we're talking about. We're not asking for anyone to become the next entrepreneurial guru. All we're saying is redefine what work looks like for you because the world is redefining it and you have to pay attention and fall into alignment so that you don't get into desperate situations.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, this was so, so amazing. I really appreciate you, Monique, for taking time to have this conversation. And I'm sure it won't be the last. Thank you so
No,
much for
thanks for
coming
having
on
me.
today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU.